Hands up! Don't touch that vest! What are you wearing? Body armor?
It's a weighted vest. I'm jogging. I'm unarmed.
Turn around, now! That device on your wrist, what is it?
It's a GPS watch. Officer, you have no legal basis to detain me.
I decide what's legal.
Officer Derek Vance had been wearing the badge of the Oak Creek Police Department for just 3 years. But he carried himself with the swagger of a man who believed the law was something he enforced, not something he was bound by. He was 28 years old, physically imposing, and aggressively ambitious, a combination that had already garnered him a reputation among his peers as a hard charger, police slang for an officer who went looking for trouble rather than waiting for it to be reported. But that Tuesday morning, under the crisp golden light of a breaking dawn, Vance wasn't just looking for trouble. He was about to manufacture a catastrophe that would cost his city $4.5 million and dismantle his own life in the process. He was patrolling the winding, tree-lined streets of Kings Crossing, an affluent suburb known for its manicured lawns, six-figure incomes, and a populace that preferred their neighborhood watch reports to remain silent. Vance liked patrolling here. It felt orderly. It felt like the kind of place that needed protecting from the outside elements he was always so vigilant against. Meanwhile, 3 streets over, Marcus Thorne was checking the straps on his vest. At 46 years old, Thorne was a creature of intense discipline. He stood 6'2" with the lean, hardened physique of a man who refused to let middle age soften him. He worked as a senior intelligence analyst for the Department of Homeland Security, a role that required him to sift through the darkest corners of international terror networks and domestic threats. His clearance level was so high that his personnel file was redacted even from most local law enforcement databases. To handle the stress of a job where a single missed detail could result in a national tragedy, Thorne ran. Every morning, rain or shine, he strapped on a 20-pound tactical weighted vest, a common fitness tool designed to increase endurance, and ran 5 miles. He wasn't carrying a weapon. He wasn't carrying drugs. He was carrying the weight of his own commitment to physical excellence. Thorne adjusted the wrist-mounted GPS monitor on his left arm, tapped the start button, and began his rhythm. Left, right, breathe. The morning air was cool, the sky a bruised purple turning to gold. He loved this time of day. It was the only time the world made sense before the briefing books and the threat assessments and the bureaucratic red tape of Washington, D.C. took over his mind. He ran with a smooth, efficient gait, his breath pluming in the chill air. He wore black compression gear under the sand-colored vest, looking every bit the operator he trained to be, though his battlefield was data and strategy. He had lived in Kings Crossing for 4 years, a quiet neighbor who paid his taxes early and kept his lawn pristine. But to the eyes watching him from behind the blinds of 412 Maple Drive, Marcus Thorne wasn't a neighbor. He was a threat. Eleanor Hunsacker, a 62-year-old retiree whose primary hobby had become monitoring the neighborhood Facebook page for suspicious activity, was already on her second cup of coffee. She peered through the slats of her plantation shutters, her eyes narrowing as she saw the large black man jogging down the street. In her mind, the narrative twisted instantly. She didn't see a fitness enthusiast in a weighted vest. She saw a paramilitary soldier. She saw a suicide bomber. She saw something out of a movie, something that didn't belong in King's Crossing. The vest looked bulky to her untrained eye. The GPS monitor on his wrist looked like a detonator. Panic, fueled by hours of cable news and an isolated worldview, seized her. She didn't pause to think. She didn't wait to see if he would just jog past, which he did. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? The dispatcher asked, her voice calm and practiced. Eleanor's voice was high-pitched, trembling with a manufactured terror. Yes, I need police immediately at King's Crossing. There's a man, a very large man running down the street. He's wearing body armor, like military armor, and he has some kind of device strapped to his arm. I think he might be casing the houses or... I don't know, he looks like he's preparing for an attack. The dispatcher paused, typing rapidly. Ma'am, is he holding a weapon? Is he threatening anyone? Eleanor hesitated, peering out the window again as Thorne disappeared around the corner. He looks threatening just being here. He's wearing a bulletproof vest. Why would anyone wear that if they weren't planning a shootout? You need to send someone before he hurts someone. The call went out over the radio, filtered through the adrenaline of the dispatch room. Unit 4 Alpha, proceed to King's Crossing. Suspicious subject, black male, heavy build, reportedly wearing tactical body armor and operating electronic devices. Caller states subject may be armed or casing residences. Officer Derek Vance heard the code, and his spine straightened. Tactical body armor. In his mind, the script was already written. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an active threat. He flipped on his lights, not the siren wanting the element of surprise. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He had been waiting for a real call all week, something to break the monotony of noise complaints and traffic stops. He sped toward King's Crossing, his mind already categorizing the man he hadn't yet met as a combatant. He didn't consider that CrossFitters wore vests. He didn't consider that federal agents lived in the area. He considered only the danger and the glory of stopping it. Thorne had finished the loop and was cooling down near the entrance of the subdivision, a small community park with a few benches and a duck pond. He checked his heart rate on the GPS, 145 beats per minute. Good. He walked slowly, hands on his hips, letting his breathing return to normal. He was thinking about the briefing he had at 10:00 a.m. regarding a potential cyber threat in the energy sector. He was completely absorbed in his thoughts when the peace of the morning was shattered. Officer Vance's cruiser roared over the curb tires, chewing up the grass, and screeched to a halt just 10 feet from where Thorne stood. Thorne didn't run. He didn't flinch. He simply stopped walking and turned to face the vehicle, his expression one of mild annoyance rather than fear. This was his first mistake in the eyes of Officer Vance. Vance burst out of the car, hand already resting on the grip of his service weapon, his stance wide and aggressive. "Let me see your hands. Get your hands up now." Vance screamed, his voice cracking with intensity. Thorne, maintaining the composure that had allowed him to brief the cabinet without sweating, slowly raised his hands to chest level, palms open. "Officer!" Thorne said, his voice a deep resonant baritone that carried authority. "I am unarmed. I am exercising. There is no need for this aggression." I said, "Get them up higher." Vance advanced, closing the distance. "Turn around. Face away from me." Thorne complied slowly, his movements deliberate. He knew the drill. He knew that any sudden movement could be interpreted as a reach. "Officer," Thorne repeated, facing the pond now. "I am a federal employee. I live in this neighborhood. My identification is in my vehicle, which is parked about 50 yards down the road at the trailhead." Vance wasn't listening. He was scanning the vest. "What are you wearing? Is that body armor? Why are you wearing body armor in a residential neighborhood?" "It is a weighted fitness vest." Thorne explained, his patience already being tested. "It weighs 20 pounds. It is for resistance training. It is not ballistic armor." Vance snorted, stepping closer, his adrenaline clouding his judgment. "Looks like tactical gear to me. And what's that on your wrist, detonator scanner?" Thorne turned his head slightly, just enough to make eye contact over his shoulder. "It is a Garmin GPS watch. It tracks my heart rate and mileage. Officer, I am going to lower my hands slowly to turn off the timer." "Don't you move," Vance shouted, drawing his taser now. "You don't touch anything until I tell you to. You're detained for suspicious conduct and loitering." Thorne stiffened. "Loitering? I am standing in a public park in a neighborhood where I own a home. I am not loitering. And suspicious conduct is not a crime unless you can articulate a specific felony or misdemeanor I am about to commit." Vance hated this. He hated when they knew the law. It felt like a challenge to his authority. "You're detained because I said so. I got a call about a man in tactical gear threatening residents. Now do you have ID on you?" "As I stated." Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. "My wallet is in my car. However, I can provide you with my badge number and my agency clearance code. I am a senior analyst with the Department of Homeland Security. If you run my name Marcus Thorne, you will see my status." Vance laughed, a short, nervous bark. "Homeland Security." "Yeah, and I'm the director of the FBI. You think I haven't heard every story in the book? You're wearing a tactical vest at 6:00 a.m., prowling around expensive houses. You're coming downtown until we figure out who you really are." "I am not going anywhere with you," Thorne said firmly. "I have identified myself. I have explained my presence. Unless you are placing me under arrest for a specific crime, I am free to go. That is the Fourth Amendment, officer. You need reasonable suspicion to detain and probable cause to arrest. You have neither." This was the tipping point. For Vance, this wasn't about the law anymore. It was about respect. He felt small in front of this large, articulate man who didn't seem afraid of his badge. He holstered the taser and grabbed Thorne's wrist. "Okay, have it your way. You're under arrest for failure to identify and resisting an officer." Thorne didn't pull away, but he didn't make it easy. He planted his feet. "I did not fail to identify. I gave you my name and occupation. You refused to verify it. This is an unlawful arrest." Vance didn't care. He kicked Thorne's legs apart, forcing the larger man off balance. He slammed Thorne against the hood of the cruiser, the heat of the engine radiating through the metal. "Stop resisting," Vance yelled for the benefit of the body camera, even though Thorne was standing perfectly still. Vance wrenched Thorne's arms behind his back. The angle was bad. Thorne's shoulders screamed in protest. "Officer, be advised," Thorne said through gritted teeth. "You are assaulting a federal officer. You are making a career-ending mistake." "Shut up." Vance clicked the handcuffs on. He made them tight, punishingly tight. The metal bit into the soft tissue of Thorne's wrists. Vance shoved him roughly toward the back door of the squad car. Thorne stumbled, but caught himself. He looked at Vance, really looked at him, memorizing the badge number 4922. Vance. "Officer Vance," Thorne said, his voice eerily calm now. "Check the front pocket of the vest. There is a pouch. My emergency medical card is there. It lists my blood type and my agency contact. Check it." "I'm not checking anything you tell me to," Vance spat. He shoved Thorne into the back seat and slammed the door. The cage was cramped. Thorne sat awkwardly, the weighted vest pressing into his spine, the handcuffs cutting off circulation. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes. He began to mentally draft the lawsuit. He catalogued the time, 6:18 a.m. He catalogued the offenses. Unlawful seizure, excessive force, battery deprivation of rights under color of law. He wouldn't just sue the city. He would ensure this officer never carried a badge again. Vance got into the front seat, breathing heavy, feeling the rush of the bust. He grabbed the radio. "Dispatch 4 Alpha, 1 in custody. Male suspect was uncooperative, resisted arrest, transporting to station for processing." He felt proud. He had caught the guy in the tactical vest. He was protecting the neighborhood. Suddenly another cruiser pulled up alongside them. It was Sergeant Miller. Miller was 52, a man with graying temples and a waistline that spoke of too many years sitting in a car and eating on the go. But Miller was a good cop, a careful cop. He had heard the radio traffic, and something about Vance's tone hadn't sat right with him. He rolled down his window. Vance rolled down his. "What do you have, Vance?" Miller asked, squinting at the suspect in the back seat. He saw a man in expensive athletic gear, not a burglar's hoodie. He saw the expensive GPS watch. He saw the composure. "Suspicious character, Sarge," Vance said, pumped up. "Wearing body armor. Refused to ID, resisted arrest. Neighbor said he was casing houses." Miller looked at Thorne. Thorne looked back. Thorne didn't look like a thug. He looked like management. Miller got out of his car and walked over to the back window of Vance's cruiser. He tapped on the glass. Vance rolled it down. "Morning," Miller said cautiously. "Sergeant," Thorne said. "My name is Marcus Thorne. I am a GS-15 senior analyst with the Department of Homeland Security. My clearance code is Alpha 7 Yankee 9. I was jogging. I offered this officer my credentials verbally and directed him to my wallet in my car. He refused, assaulted me, and arrested me without cause. I am requesting you contact the DHS watch desk immediately. The number is 202-282-8000. Ask for the duty officer. Miller froze. He knew that tone. That wasn't the tone of a criminal trying to bluff. That was the tone of a man who gave orders to people who gave orders to Miller. And GS-15. That was the civilian equivalent of a colonel or a general. Miller looked at Vance. Vance was smirking, shaking his head. "Guy's full of it, Sarge. He's just throwing out jargon." "Vance," Miller said, his voice low and dangerous. "Did you check his wallet?" "He said it was in his car. I didn't leave the scene." "Did you check the vest?" "No." Miller swore under his breath. He turned back to Thorne. "Stay tight, sir." Miller walked back to his cruiser and grabbed the radio mic. He didn't use the main channel. He switched to the secure channel used for sensitive checks. "Dispatch, this is Sergeant Miller. Need a priority check on a name. Thorne, Marcus, Thorne. Possible federal affiliation." The wait was 30 seconds, but it felt like an hour. Vance was tapping his steering wheel, impatient. Miller was watching the dashboard, a pit forming in his stomach. The radio crackled. "Sergeant Miller?" The dispatcher's voice was different now, tense, urgent. "I have a Priority 1 flag on that subject. DHS active status. Top secret/SCI clearance. The system is flashing a do not detain warning without direct authorization from the Attorney General's office. We have a call coming in on the landline from the DHS field office in Seattle. They want to know why their analyst's panic beacon just triggered." Miller felt the blood drain from his face. The GPS watch. It wasn't just a tracker. It was a safety device for high-value assets. Thorne had triggered a silent alarm when he was handcuffed. Miller walked back to Vance's car. He looked like he had seen a ghost. "Vance," he said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Get him out. Now. What, Sarge, I'm telling you. Get him out of the car and take those cuffs off immediately. You just arrested a Homeland Security analyst with top-level clearance. Washington is on the phone. You verify Vance. You always verify." Vance looked at Miller, then back at Thorne. The smirk vanished. The arrogance crumbled into a sudden, sickening realization. He opened the door. He unlocked the cuffs. His hands were shaking so bad he dropped the key once. Thorne stepped out of the car. He didn't rub his wrists immediately. He stood to his full height, adjusting his vest. He looked at Vance, who was staring at the ground, unable to meet his eyes. Thorne's silence was louder than any scream. He looked at Sergeant Miller. "Sergeant," Thorne said, "I want your body camera footage secured. I want his body camera footage secured. I want the dispatch logs preserved. And I want the name of the caller who reported me." "Yes, sir," Miller said. "Sir, I apologize on behalf of—" "Save it for the deposition," Thorne said. "I am going to finish my run. My car is at the trailhead. I expect you to follow me there so I can retrieve my physical ID, which you will then document to close this file. And then I am going to make a phone call that will change the leadership of this department." Thorne turned and jogged away, his pace steady, his form perfect. Vance stood by his cruiser, watching the man disappear into the morning mist. He knew with a terrifying certainty that his life as he knew it was over. The fallout was swift, brutal, and public. The body camera footage was released 3 weeks later after the internal investigation concluded. It went viral within hours. The image of Officer Vance, aggressive and sneering, manhandling a calm, compliant black federal agent, became the lead story on every national news network. The contrast was impossible to ignore the professional dignity of Thorne versus the insecure bullying of Vance. The lawsuit filed by Marcus Thorne was a masterclass in civil rights litigation. It didn't just target Vance. It targeted the training protocols of the Oak Creek Police Department. It exposed a pattern of pretextual stops in the department where officers were encouraged to find reasons to stop outsiders in affluent neighborhoods. The city attorney took one look at the evidence, the video, and the federal pressure coming from DHS and advised the city council to settle immediately, $4.5 million. That was the check the city wrote to Marcus Thorne. But the money wasn't the point. Derek Vance was fired 2 months after the incident. He was stripped of his certification, meaning he could never work as a police officer in the state again. The neighbor Eleanor Hunsacker was named in a civil defamation suit and faced public shaming that forced her to move out of King's Crossing within the year. But as the dust settled, the victory felt hollow. 6 months later, Marcus Thorne was back on his morning run. It was another beautiful dawn. He wore the same vest. He ran the same path. But as he ran, he found himself checking over his shoulder every time a car passed. He found himself scanning for uniforms, his heart rate spiking not from exertion, but from memory. He realized that no amount of money, no badge, and no clearance level could buy back the feeling of safety he had lost. He was a high-ranking official in the United States government, charged with protecting the Homeland, yet he couldn't even protect himself from the bias of a man sworn to serve him. The system had worked eventually, but only because Thorne had the power to force it to work. What if he had been a school teacher, a mechanic, a nurse? That was the question that haunted him as he ran through the quiet streets. This story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Why is reasonable suspicion so often based on who fits a visual profile rather than actual behavior? Why do we allow officers like Vance to remain on the force until they cost taxpayers millions? And most importantly, how many Marcus Thornes are there who don't have a badge to save them? Where are you watching from today? Do you think officers should be personally liable for settlements when they violate civil rights? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe stories like this need to be told to hold power accountable, please hit that subscribe button and share this video. Together, we can shine a light on the truth. Until next time, stay safe and know your rights. The end.
Ma'am, I gave you a lawful order. Stand up. ID. Now.
This is a public park. We are committing no crime. You have no legal basis to detain us.
You don't need to lecture me. You're acting suspicious. Turn around. Officer, please. She's done nothing wrong. Back up. Both of you. Hands where I can see them.
Stop.
Willow Creek Park is the jewel of Oak Ridge. It sits adjacent to the wealthier subdivision of the city, a sprawling expanse of manicured emerald grass, weeping willows dipping their branches into a slow-moving stream and stone walking paths that circle a central pond. It is public property maintained by city taxes, open to anyone who wishes to enjoy the sunlight. It was 1:15 p.m. The sky was a piercing blue, clear and bright. The temperature was a perfect 72 degrees. Judge Eleanor Mathis had served on the federal bench for 12 years. Her career was a testament to iron discipline and intellectual rigor. She had spent a decade as a federal prosecutor putting away organized crime figures and dismantling trafficking rings before being appointed as a magistrate judge. She was known in the Western District for her piercing intellect, her encyclopedic knowledge of constitutional law, and a temperament that was calm, fair, but utterly unyielding when it came to the rules of her court. She was a woman who commanded respect not by raising her voice, but by lowering it. That Thursday was her 30th wedding anniversary. She had taken a rare afternoon off. Her husband, Dr. Marcus Mathis, had cleared his surgery schedule. Marcus was a man of quiet strength, a surgeon whose hands had saved thousands of lives, a man who had navigated the complexities of race and medicine in America for 40 years with grace and dignity. They had decided to keep it simple. They packed a basket with sparkling water, artisanal cheese, fresh fruit, and sandwiches from their favorite deli. They drove to Willow Creek, found a shaded spot under a massive oak tree near the water, and spread out a blanket. They looked like exactly what they were, an affluent, successful older couple enjoying a quiet milestone in their marriage. Eleanor wore a linen sundress and a wide-brimmed hat to shield her eyes. Marcus was in polo shirt and pressed khakis. They were laughing softly, reminiscing about their honeymoon in Charleston 3 decades prior. They weren't playing loud music. They weren't shouting. They were eating grapes and holding hands. But in the eyes of Officer Kyle Vance and the woman who called him, they were something else entirely. They were an anomaly. They were out of place. And for an officer like Vance, who viewed the world through a lens of suspicion rather than service, out of place was enough to justify a confrontation. He didn't see a judge and a surgeon. He saw targets. To understand why Officer Vance arrived at the park with his mind already made up, we have to look at the call that set these events in motion. The caller was Brenda Holloway, a 52-year-old resident of the Willow Creek subdivision. Brenda was the self-appointed guardian of the neighborhood's aesthetic. She was the president of the Homeowners Association, a position she wielded with the enthusiasm of a feudal lord. She spent her days monitoring the streets from her front bay window phone in hand, ready to report anything that didn't align with her vision of the community. From her vantage point across the street from the park entrance, Brenda saw the Matheses pull up in their luxury sedan. She watched them unload their picnic basket. She watched them walk to the shade of the oak tree. There was no crime being committed. There was no disturbance. But Brenda felt a distinct sense of territorial anxiety. In her mind, the park was an extension of her subdivision intended for residents. While the park was technically public, the locals treated it as their private backyard. And she didn't recognize Eleanor and Marcus. She watched them for 10 minutes, her irritation growing. They looked too comfortable. They were taking up the best spot near the water. Why were they here? Why weren't they at work? Brenda picked up her phone and dialed the non-emergency police line, a number she had saved in her favorites. Oak Ridge Police Dispatcher Miller? Yes, this is Brenda Holloway. I'm calling to report suspicious activity at Willow Creek Park. The dispatcher, who knew Brenda's voice well from dozens of prior frivolous calls, sighed audibly. What is the nature of the suspicious activity, Ms. Holloway? There are 2 people, a man and a woman, loitering in the park. They don't live here. I know everyone who lives here. They've been sitting on the grass for 20 minutes, just watching the houses. Are they threatening anyone? Are they causing a disturbance? They are making me feel unsafe, Brenda insisted, her voice tightening. They are loitering, and I think they might be casing the homes across the street. They're just sitting there. It's the middle of the workday. Decent people are at work. I want an officer to come check them out. We have a no trespassing policy for non-residents after dusk, and they look like they're settling in. It's 100 p.m., Ms. Holloway. The park is open to the public during the day. Well, I want them checked, Brenda snapped. They don't belong here. Send someone now. The call was logged. The dispatcher coded it as a suspicious person, check subject call, but included notes. Caller is regular complainant Holloway. Subjects described as picnicking. When the call came over the radio, Officer Kyle Vance was 2 miles away, sitting in his cruiser, bored. He read the dispatch notes on his computer terminal. Suspicious persons, loitering, casing homes. He ignored the part about the caller being a known nuisance. He ignored the time of day. His mind latched onto the narrative that offered the most excitement potential burglars scouting a wealthy neighborhood. Vance had a history that should have precluded him from wearing a badge. In his 6 years, he had accumulated 14 internal complaints. Most were for rudeness, 2 for unauthorized searches, and 3 for bias-based profiling. He was known in the department as a hothead, an officer who escalated calm situations into chaos because he perceived any question as a challenge to his manhood. His supervisors had written him up, sent him to sensitivity training seminars, which he slept through, and warned him to tone it down. But the union protected him, and the culture of the department tolerated him because he wrote a lot of tickets and made arrest quotas. Vance threw his cruiser into gear and sped toward Willow Creek Park. He wasn't going there to investigate. He was going there to evict. He had already decided the outcome before he even saw the subjects. In his mind, he was the thin blue line protecting the good citizens of Willow Creek from the suspicious outsiders. Do you think officers should have access to the history of the 911 caller before they arrive on scene? Let us know in the comments below. Officer Vance pulled his patrol unit up to the curb of Willow Creek Park at 1:28 p.m. He didn't park in a designated spot. He pulled partially onto the grass, a power move designed to intimidate. He stepped out of the vehicle, adjusting his utility belt, checking the fit of his sunglasses. He was a large man, bulky from hours at the gym, carrying himself with a stiff, coiled aggression. He scanned the park. It was mostly empty, save for a young woman reading on a bench far away and the couple under the oak tree. Eleanor and Marcus Mathis. Vance began his approach. He didn't walk with the casual open gait of a community peace officer. He marched. His hand rested near his holster, not on it but close enough to send a message. As he got closer, he saw the expensive picnic basket, the sparkling water, the hardbound books. He saw a man in a crisp polo and a woman in a designer dress. But confirmation bias is a powerful blinder. Vance didn't see a wealthy couple. He saw two people trying to look innocent, which in his twisted logic made them guilty. Marcus noticed the officer first. He tapped Eleanor's hand gently. "Ellie, we have company." Eleanor looked up, shielding her eyes against the sun. She saw the officer looming over them. She remained seated, her posture relaxed but attentive. She had spent a lifetime in courtrooms. She knew how to read body language, and Officer Vance was screaming hostility. Vance stopped 5 feet from their blanket. He didn't say, "Good afternoon." He didn't ask, "How are you folks doing? You two live around here?" Vance barked, his voice loud enough to carry across the water. Eleanor took a sip of her water, deliberately slow before setting the glass down. "Good afternoon, officer. Is there a problem?" "I asked you a question," Vance said, stepping closer, his shadow falling over their food. "Do you live in this neighborhood? Let me see some ID." Marcus began to reach for his wallet, a reflex born of survival, but Eleanor placed a hand on his arm to stop him. She looked at Vance with the cool, analytical gaze that had withered defense attorneys for a decade. "Officer," Eleanor said, her voice steady and clear, "we are enjoying a private lunch in a public park. We are not committing any crime. We are not creating a disturbance. Unless you can articulate a reasonable suspicion that we have committed, are committing, or are about to commit a crime, we are not required to identify ourselves." Vance's face flushed. In his 6 years on the street, he wasn't used to people quoting the law back to him. He was used to fear. He was used to submission. This woman sitting on the ground looking up at him was speaking to him like he was a first-year law student who had failed an exam. "I got a call about suspicious activity." Vance lied, inflating the nature of the complaint. "Loitering. Casing houses. Now this park is for residents. If you don't live here, you're trespassing. So I'm going to ask you one more time. ID. Now." "That is incorrect," Eleanor stated. "This is Willow Creek Park. It is municipal property maintained by the Oak Ridge Department of Parks and Recreation. It is open to the public from sunrise to sunset. There is no residency requirement. As for loitering, having a picnic is not loitering. It is the intended use of this space." Vance's jaw tightened. He felt his control slipping. The logic didn't matter to him. The law didn't matter. What mattered was that a black woman was telling him no. "Listen to me." Vance stepped onto the corner of their blanket, his muddy boot soiling the fabric. "I don't care what you think you know. When I ask for ID, you give it to me. You're acting suspicious. Refusing to identify is obstruction. Now stand up, both of you." Marcus looked at the officer, his concern growing. "Officer, look, we're just celebrating our anniversary. My name is Dr. Mathis. This is my wife. We aren't trying to cause any trouble." "I didn't ask for your life story," Vance snapped, pointing a finger in Marcus's face. "I said stand up." Get your hands out of your pockets. The situation had shifted from an annoyance to a constitutional crisis in the span of 90 seconds. Eleanor Mathis realized that reason was not going to penetrate Officer Vance's armor of aggression. She had seen officers like this in her courtroom men who escalated encounters because they lacked the emotional intelligence to de-escalate them. But she also knew that as a black woman in America, even with her title, she was in a precarious position. She stood up slowly, dusting off her dress. She signaled for Marcus to do the same. She moved with a deliberate regal slowness that seemed to infuriate Vance even more. "Officer," Eleanor said, standing at her full height. She was 5'7", but she projected the authority of a giant. "You are making a significant mistake. I am going to reach into my purse now. I am going to retrieve my credentials. I strongly suggest you look at them before you take this any further." "Don't reach for anything," Vance yelled, his hand dropping to his holster, unsnapping the retention strap. "Turn around. Turn around now." "I am not turning around," Eleanor said, her voice hardening. "I am telling you that I am a federal judge. My husband is a surgeon. You are harassing us based on a bias-motivated call. You have no probable cause." "Federal judge?" Vance scoffed. He laughed, a short, cruel sound. "Yeah, right. And I'm the director of the FBI. You think I haven't heard every lie in the book? You people always have some story." "You people." The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. By now, the commotion had drawn attention. 2 joggers had stopped on the path. A man walking his dog had paused and pulled out his phone. The camera was rolling. Vance didn't care. In his mind, the camera was just recording his righteous enforcement of the law against disorderly subjects. "I am giving you a lawful order," Vance shouted, stepping into Eleanor's personal space. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for trespassing, failure to identify, and resisting an officer." "I am not resisting," Eleanor said, ensuring her voice was loud enough for the witnesses to hear. "I am questioning the legality of your order. There is no trespass. There is no crime. You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights." "That's it," Vance growled. He didn't wait for compliance. He grabbed Eleanor's arm. He didn't use the gentle guide of a professional. He used the rough, wrenching grip of a brawler. He spun her around with enough force that she stumbled. "Hey!" Marcus shouted, stepping forward. "Get your hands off her. She has arthritis in her shoulder." Vance shoved Marcus back with his free hand hard enough to send the older man staggering against the tree trunk. "Back up, or you're next, old man. Back up. Do not touch my husband." Eleanor cried out, the pain in her shoulder shooting down her arm. "Officer, you are assaulting a federal magistrate. Stop this now." "Stop fighting," Vance yelled, playing to the imaginary audience that would justify his report. He yanked Eleanor's arms behind her back, twisting her wrists upward. The pain was sharp and immediate. He pulled the handcuffs from his belt. Click, click. The sound of the ratchets tightening was sickeningly loud in the quiet park. Eleanor Mathis, a woman who had signed warrants for the FBI, who had sentenced international drug lords, who was one of the most respected legal minds in the state, was now handcuffed like a common criminal in the middle of a picnic. Vance wasn't finished. He turned to Marcus. "You too. You want to intervene? You're going for obstruction." "I am not intervening," Marcus said. His hands raised, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "I am watching you assault my wife. I am a doctor. You are hurting her." "Turn around!" Vance grabbed Marcus, spinning him and slamming him against the tree. He cuffed the surgeon quickly, roughly. There they stood, a surgeon and a judge, handcuffed, humiliated, their anniversary lunch trampled in the dirt. "You have destroyed your career," Eleanor said quietly, her back to Vance. She wasn't shouting anymore. Her voice had dropped to a terrified calm. "You have no idea what you have just done." "Shut up," Vance said, breathing heavy, the adrenaline of the bully coursing through him. "Get moving, to the car." The walk to the patrol car was a procession of shame, but not for the couple. It was a shame that belonged to the officer, though he was too blinded by his own ego to feel it yet. The witnesses were filming. A woman shouted from the path, "They didn't do anything. They were just eating lunch." Vance ignored her. He shoved Eleanor into the back seat of the cruiser. It was a tight plastic cage. The heat was stifling. He shoved Marcus in the other side. They sat squeezed together, hands bound behind their backs, their shoulders touching. "Are you okay?" Marcus whispered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Your shoulder. It hurts," Eleanor admitted, wincing. "But I'm more worried about him. He's dangerous." Vance got into the front seat. He didn't check on their comfort. He didn't buckle them in. He started the car and peeled away from the curb, driving fast, aggressive. "You folks think you can just come into a nice neighborhood and do whatever you want." Vance lectured them from the front seat, watching them in the rearview mirror. "Think you can talk back to police? Think the rules don't apply to you? Maybe where you come from that works, but not in Oak Ridge. We have order here." "I live 4 miles from here," Marcus said calmly. "In the Highlands." "Sure you do," Vance sneered. "And I live in a castle. You know, if you'd just been humble, if you'd just shown me some ID and moved along when I told you to, none of this would have happened. You brought this on yourselves. It's about respect. You have to respect authority." Eleanor stared at the back of his head. She was memorizing everything. The time, the route, his badge number 492, his name tag Vance. Every word he spoke was another nail in the coffin of his career. She didn't argue with him anymore. There is no point in arguing with a storm. You just document the damage. "Officer," Eleanor said, "I am requesting that you contact your supervisor immediately upon arrival." "You'll see the sergeant when I'm done processing you," Vance said. "You're going to sit in a holding cell and think about your attitude. Maybe I'll let you go with a citation in a few hours if you apologize." He actually believed that. He believed he was going to teach them a lesson, write them a ticket for trespassing, and send them on their way. He had done it before to teenagers, to construction workers, to people he deemed lesser. He had no concept of the storm that was gathering over his head. The drive to the precinct took 15 minutes. When they pulled into the Sally Port, the garage door rumbling shut behind them, the atmosphere changed. The precinct was a place of procedure. Cameras were everywhere. Vance hauled them out of the car. He marched them through the heavy steel doors into the intake area. The desk sergeant on duty was Thomas Miller. He was 58 years old, a 30-year veteran who was counting the days to retirement. He was a good cop, a man who knew the community, who knew the players. He was sipping coffee and reviewing a shift log when Vance walked in with his 2 prisoners. Miller looked up. He saw Officer Vance flushed and looking triumphant. Then he looked at the prisoners. He saw a man in a polo shirt looking dignified but furious. He saw a woman in a linen dress, her hat missing her hair, slightly mussed, but her eyes burning with a cold, terrifying intelligence. Miller's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. He squinted. He recognized the woman. He had seen her picture in the paper. He had testified in her courtroom 3 years ago on a federal task force case. His stomach dropped through the floor. "Vance," Miller said, his voice low and strangled. "What do you have here?" "Trespassing at Willow Creek," Vance announced, throwing the paperwork on the high counter. "Refused to identify. Resisting. Disorderly. Real piece of work, these 2. Claimed she was a federal judge." Vance laughed again. Miller didn't laugh. He stood up slowly. He looked at Eleanor. "Ma'am," Miller said, Are you Judge Mathis?" Eleanor looked at the sergeant. "I am U.S. Magistrate Judge Eleanor Mathis. This is my husband, Dr. Marcus Mathis. I was arrested while eating a sandwich. I would like these handcuffs off. Now." The silence that fell over the intake room was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum before an explosion. Officer Vance looked at Sergeant Miller. He looked at Eleanor. The smile faded from his face, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "Sarge, you buy that?" She's just saying, "Shut your mouth, Vance," Miller roared. The volume of his voice made the young officer jump. "Shut your mouth right now." And Miller came around the desk. He didn't walk, he ran. "Key, give me your key." "Sarge, they were resisting." "Give me the damn key." Miller snatched the key from Vance's hand. He moved behind Eleanor. "Judge Mathis, I don't even know what to say. I am so sorry." He unlocked the cuffs. Eleanor brought her arms forward, rubbing her wrists. There were deep red indentations where the metal had bitten into her skin. Miller moved to Marcus and unlocked him immediately. "Doctor, my apologies. Are you injured? Do you need a medic?" "My wife has a shoulder injury," Marcus said, his voice icy. "He assaulted her." Vance was standing by the counter looking like a child who had just realized he had broken the most expensive vase in the house. The reality was crashing down on him. The confidence was draining away, replaced by a cold, sick dread. She didn't show ID," Vance stammered. "She wouldn't show ID." "I tried to show you my credentials," Eleanor said, turning to face him. She wasn't yelling. She was speaking with the absolute finality of a sentencing hearing. "I told you exactly who I was. You told me it was a fake. You told me to shut up. You told me I didn't belong." "Vance." Miller set his face purple with rage. "Go into the conference room. Sit down. Don't touch your radio. Don't touch your phone. Just sit there." "But..." "Go!" Vance retreated, disappearing into the side room. Miller turned back to the couple. "Judge, I am calling the chief right now. He's at a luncheon, but he will be here in 10 minutes. Please come sit in my office. Can I get you water ice for your wrists?" "I want the footage preserved," Eleanor said. "Body cam, dash cam, Sallyport video, everything. And I want to make a formal criminal complaint for assault and false imprisonment." "It's already being pulled, Judge," Miller promised. "Everything is being locked down." 10 minutes later, Chief of Police Robert Danton burst through the doors. He was a man who prided himself on running a clean department, and he looked like he was about to have a stroke. He saw Eleanor Mathis sitting in the sergeant's office, holding an ice pack to her wrist. He knew her. He had attended Rotary Club meetings with her. "Judge Mathis," Danton said, breathless. "Eleanor, I got the call from Miller." "Robert," Eleanor said calmly, "your officer arrested me for being black in a public park." "I know. I saw the preliminary log. There are no words." "There are words, Robert," Eleanor said. "The words are false arrest, assault, and civil rights violation. That young man out there put his hands on me. He twisted my arm behind my back while I was holding a sandwich. He called us you people. He told us we didn't belong." She stood up. "He is a danger to this community." "If he did this to me, Robert, imagine what he has been doing to people who don't have my title. Imagine what he does to the teenagers who can't call the chief of police." The reckoning was swift, brutal, and public. Chief Danton didn't wait for an internal affairs investigation to drag on for months. He reviewed the body camera footage in his office with Eleanor and Marcus present. The video was damning. It showed everything: the aggressive approach, the immediate hostility, the polite legal responses from the couple, the escalation, the assault, the mockery in the car. It was a masterclass in bad policing. Danton walked out of his office and into the conference room where Vance was sitting. The young officer stood up. "Chief, let me explain. They were being difficult." "Badge," Danton said. He held out his hand. "Sir, badge, gun, ID card. Put them on the table." Vance's hands shook. Am I on leave?" "You are suspended without pay pending termination proceedings which I am initiating today," Danton said. "And you are under criminal investigation for assault and deprivation of rights under color of law. You are done, Vance. You are not a police officer anymore. You are a liability. Vance stripped his gear. He placed the badge number 492 on the table. It made a heavy clunk. "Get out of my station," Danton said. As Vance walked out the back door, stripped of his authority, wearing just a t-shirt and uniform pants, he looked small. He passed the window of the sergeant's office. Eleanor Mathis was watching him. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just watched him with a look of profound disappointment. But the story didn't end there. The footage was released. It had to be. The state's open records laws were clear, and Eleanor Mathis demanded transparency. The video went viral within hours. Judge arrested for picnicking. Officer tells federal magistrate, "You people." The outrage was volcanic. Protests erupted outside the Oak Ridge Police Department. The FBI Civil Rights Division opened an investigation the next morning. The lawsuit followed. It wasn't just about the arrest. It was about the culture that allowed Vance to stay on the force despite 14 prior complaints. It was about the failure to supervise. Brenda Holloway, the caller, was not spared. While it is rare for 911 callers to face consequences, the audio of her call was released. Her frantic insistence that "they don't look like they live here" was exposed as purely racial bias. She was sued for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She lost her position as HOA president. She became a pariah in the neighborhood she claimed to be protecting. The city settled the civil rights lawsuit for $6.5 million. It was the largest payout in the city's history. But for Eleanor and Marcus Mathis, it wasn't about the money. They donated a significant portion of the settlement to the Legal Aid Society and a scholarship fund for minority law students. Kyle Vance was fired. His certification to be a police officer was permanently revoked by the state board. He would never carry a badge or a gun again. He was charged criminally with misdemeanor assault and official oppression. He pleaded guilty to avoid jail time, receiving 2 years of probation and a permanent criminal record. At 29, he was a felon, unemployable in security or law enforcement, forced to start over with the weight of his disgrace following him everywhere. The Oak Ridge Police Department underwent a DOJ-mandated overhaul. New policies were implemented regarding suspicious person calls. Officers were stripped of the discretion to demand ID without clear articulable criminal suspicion. The residents-only culture of the public parks was dismantled. On the 1-year anniversary of the arrest, Eleanor and Marcus Mathis returned to Willow Creek Park. They went to the same tree. They spread the same blanket. They ate the same lunch. A young officer walked by on foot patrol. He was new hired under the reformed standards. He saw them. He didn't stop. He didn't ask for ID. He simply nodded and touched the brim of his cap. "Good afternoon, folks. Beautiful day for it." "Yes, it is," Marcus replied. The officer kept walking. It was a small moment, but a heavy one. It was what justice looked like, not a courtroom victory, but the simple quiet, right to exist in a public space without fear. But we must ask ourselves, what if Eleanor hadn't been a judge? What if she had been a school teacher, a nurse, or a janitor? Would the handcuffs have come off so quickly? Would the chief have arrived in 10 minutes? Would the settlement have been millions? Or would they have been processed, charged, and forced to plead out to a disorderly conduct charge just to go home? Eleanor Mathis saved herself because she had the power of the federal government behind her. But the system shouldn't require a federal badge to treat citizens with dignity. This story ended with justice, but only because the victim was powerful enough to demand it. How many Kyle Vances are still out there patrolling your streets? How many Brenda Holloways are watching from their windows? And how many innocent people are sitting in cells right now because they didn't have the title judge to save them? If this story moved you, if you believe that we must demand better from those who hold power, please leave a comment below. Share this video. Let's keep the light on in the dark corners. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and take care of each other.